Easter Sunday, April 5th, 2026. Right around 6 in the evening. That was the exact moment Brian Hooker dialed Kathy Shepard. Kathy was Lynette's stepmother, married to her father. Someone who loved her deeply. Someone who had every right to know the truth. Something about the timing of that call feels off. Lynette went missing on the evening of April 4th, yet Brian only reported her missing to Bahamian police at 4 in the morning on April 5th. The search was already moving. Rescue teams were already out on the open water. Officers had already taken his official statement, and a local boatyard guard had heard his story. Only then, at 6 in the evening on Easter Sunday, did he finally call her family. 14 long hours after reporting her. Nearly a full day since she vanished. No urgent voicemail left during those chaotic morning hours. No quick text sent at 4 in the morning when he hit shore. Just a casual phone call late on Easter Sunday, long after the sun had already risen and set. Hours after a massive search began, without her family even knowing she was lost. That timeline is not physical evidence, of course, but it leaves a cold feeling. And what Brian told Kathy during that overdue call, his version of those dark hours, holds the most critical detail of all. You see, Brian Hooker has given 3 completely different accounts of where Lynette was swimming when he last saw her. These are not minor shifts where tiny details fade over time. We are talking about 3 completely separate directions she was supposedly heading. Over here, over there, and somewhere else entirely. None of those directions match up, not even close to each other. If you believe every single detail deserves a real, honest look, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications now. Every fact in this case comes straight from verified public records, serious coverage from Ashley Banfield, Fox News Digital, and reports in the Daily Mail. These are first-hand accounts from those closest to Lynette Hooker. None of this is made up. Nothing at all. Let's walk through those 3 conflicting stories together. Story number 1 is what Brian told the Hopetown Volunteer Fire and Rescue. He shared the same thing with Blaine Stevenson on a 40-minute call verified by CBS News. In this version, the last time Brian saw Lynette, she was swimming out toward their sailboat, the Soulmate, anchored nearly 1,000 yards off. She was heading south, pushing through the water to reach safety. Story number 2 is what Brian told Edward Smith, the overnight guard working the Marsh Harbor boatyard. That was right after Brian struggled ashore there around 4 a.m. A timeline Fox News Digital later confirmed by interviewing Smith. In this tale, Lynette was last seen swimming toward Hopetown, carrying a yellow bag. Except Hopetown is north. Their sailboat was way south. That is not some minor slip of the mind. That is the exact opposite direction. Then there is story number 3, told directly to Lynette's stepmother, Kathy Shepard, on Easter Sunday. A conversation Kathy later recounted to investigator Ashley Banfield. This time, Brian claimed that when he last saw Lynette, she was swimming straight toward the shore, north, shore, boat. 3 people, 3 completely different directions. In one single night. I want to be completely fair when we talk about trauma and memory. Experts have proven that terrifying events distort our recall, muddying fine details, shifting feelings, and carving massive blanks in our minds. That reality must be factored into any honest look at this case. But science also tells us something else. The kinds of details trauma scrambles are usually small, peripheral things, like the exact words spoken, or the precise levels of panic, or maybe the precise order of a dozen tiny actions. But trauma does not suddenly flip the entire direction someone was heading when you last looked at them, because that is not a minor footnote. That is the absolute center of your final visual memory. That is the final image burned into your mind before they vanished. If your wife gets swept away from you in dark water, you remember which way she was drifting. South, north, the shore. These are not three versions of the same memory. They are three completely different stories. And there is another detail in what Brian told Kathy that keeps playing in my mind. He told her he threw a seat cushion toward Lynette after she went overboard. A seat cushion, not a life ring, no throw bag, just a seat cushion. To everyone else, Fire and Rescue, and Blaine Stevenson. On that recorded call, he claimed he threw a floaty, a floating device designed for water rescue. He never mentioned a seat cushion to them, only to Kathy. Maybe it was the same object, described slightly differently. Maybe that was just the only thing within reach. I honestly do not know. But it is one more loose thread. And there is a serious timing conflict in his story to Kathy that deserves close attention. Brian told her that because it was getting dark when Lynette fell in, he did not know if she even reached what he threw. Getting dark, he said it was getting dark when he lost her. But sunset in the Abaco Islands on April 4th, 2026, was recorded at approximately 7:50 p.m. Documented astronomical data for that location on that date. Brian and Lynette left the Abaco Inn around 7:30 p.m. The ride to where the Soulmate was anchored in Aunt Pat's Bay takes roughly 10 to 12 minutes, placing them in that channel at approximately 7:40 to 7:42 p.m. At 7:40 p.m. in the Bahamas in early April, with the actual sunset still 10 minutes away, there is still usable evening light in the sky. Not bright midday light, but enough to see clearly. Enough to see a person in the water. The darkness Brian described to Kathy does not fit the documented sunset. And then there is the photograph. Ashley Banfield featured it on her most recent episode of Drop Dead Serious. Not just a weather report. Not wind speed data from a meteorological database. Not expert analysis or reconstructed modeling. But a photograph of the Soulmate in Aunt Pat's Bay with a timestamp of 7:41 p.m. April 4th, 2026. Let that reality sink in for a second. 7:41 p.m. is the exact moment when Brian says the sea conditions were too severe to reach Lynette. When he says 2 to 4 foot waves were rolling through the anchorage. When he says the wind was blowing and the swells were separating them. When he claims a former United States Marine with one oar and a functioning electric motor could not reach his wife in the water, but the photograph shows the water in Aunt Pat's Bay at that exact moment. The water is completely flat. No choppy water. No whitecaps. Not rolling with heavy swells. Absolutely glass calm. I want to be very precise about what I am telling you. I did not take this photograph myself. I cannot independently verify the timestamp. What I know is that Ashley Banfield, who traveled to the Bahamas, who has sources throughout the Bahamian sailing and rescue community, who has been investigating this case longer and closer than almost anyone else in public media, presented this photograph with a confirmed timestamp of 7:41 p.m. and described the water clearly, dead calm. Her words. And this photograph does not exist completely in isolation. It exists alongside weather documentation from that night that consistently describes calm conditions, alongside photos taken at the Abaco Inn that evening, showing a remarkably still, lovely night, alongside consistent accounts from local people who were on or near the water. The photograph fits everything the documented record has shown. But there is something uniquely different about a photograph. You do not need a forensic expert to explain it to you. You do not need a maritime attorney to interpret it. You do not need a specialist of any kind. It is a picture of the water at 7:41 p.m. Brian said the sea was angry. The photograph shows something else entirely. Those two conflicting things cannot both be true. And when you hold that image alongside those three different stories about which direction Lynette was swimming, one clear document showing the conditions, and three accounts that clash on her direction, something becomes obvious. subscribe to the channel. The story Brian keeps telling simply does not hold together, especially against a real photograph. It cannot survive a time-stamped record, nor the documented facts of that night. Now, let us look closely at that engine, because I really need to explain something here that Ashley flagged this week, a point I think people moved past way too quickly. The Hooker family dinghy had an electric motor called the NT300. Fully documented. Lynette texted her friend Marn Stevenson about it. Truly excited, because it came with Bluetooth capability. She could monitor the battery levels directly from her phone in real time, and that matters immensely to people depending on their dinghy for everything. Mentioning it was just her way of understanding the tools around her. An electric motor with Bluetooth records data. It keeps telemetric records of the motor's activity. It logs how much power it drew, when, and for how long. If the dinghy ran that motor on the night of April 4th, that record exists. But here's the catch. The NT300 stores its telemetrics directly on the batteries, not in the motor itself. Ashley confirmed this week that the engine sitting on the back of the dinghy in Royal Bahamas Police Force custody is actually the older, outdated Torqeedo motor. It is their earlier engine, the one used before upgrading, not the new one. That old Torqeedo. Brian and Lynette had already transitioned to the NT300, their current engine. It should be mounted on the dinghy. Instead, the old one is there, and the NT300 batteries, which hold the telemetric record of where that dinghy actually went on the night of April 4th, are completely unaccounted for. Let us pause right here for a moment, because this is where I want to be careful. I am not telling you what happened to those specific batteries. Brian Hooker has not been charged with any crime, and his defense attorney states he categorically and unequivocally denies all wrongdoing. All individuals referenced in this episode are presumed innocent unless they are formally charged and convicted in a court of law. What I am telling you is a record exists of exactly where that dinghy went, and that record lives directly on those NT300 batteries. Those batteries are completely unaccounted for, and the old Torqeedo, which lacks that same telemetric tracking capability, is sitting on the dinghy right now. That is what investigators in Fort Pierce desperately need to find an answer for. Ashley asked it directly. Where are the batteries? Does the power level remaining on them reflect 9 hours of drifting from Aunt Pat's Bay to Marsh Harbor? Or does it show us something entirely different? We do not know yet, but the CGIS agents processing the Soulmate in Fort Pierce already know what is there and what is missing. Take the FLIR camera. Ashley identified one mounted on the mast of the Soulmate. FLIR means thermal imaging. It records heat signatures rather than visible light, which means it works in pitch black darkness. Many sailors keep them running continuously, letting them monitor their vessel remotely. If you are on shore, you check your camera, and you can see if anyone or anything is moving near your boat in the dark. Had that camera been operational on the evening of April 4th, and nothing in the public record suggests it was not, it would have captured all that activity. It would show if a dinghy actually approached the Soulmate that night. We would see whether anyone boarded, and what happened in that anchorage during those dark hours. Maybe it was not running. Maybe the footage is gone. Both are real possibilities. But modern, connected cameras often sync to cloud servers automatically. Blink cameras, which Ashley previously confirmed were on board the Soulmate, automatically send motion-triggered clips to Amazon Cloud Storage without any manual action from the user. That data does not simply live on the physical device. In the Nancy Guthrie case, images from a camera without an active subscription were fully recoverable because the data still existed in the company infrastructure. Every case is different. Every digital system is different. But investigators who have had full custody of the Soulmate for weeks definitely know what those cameras captured. They know if the FLIR camera was actually running. They know if those blink clips exist. They have been on and off that boat daily since May 9th. Investigators already know what is there, We are simply waiting to find out. This week, Nathan's footage brought something critical to light. As a local in the Abaco Islands, Nathan has been searching key areas linked to the case and filming everything he uncovers. He headed straight to the north end of Lubbers Quarters Key, specifically the western side. Brian claimed he drifted for 9 hours toward Marsh Harbor, hit the north end of Lubbers Quarters, but just could not paddle to land because of the heavy winds. So, according to him, he threw his anchor down. He fired 2 flares, but passing boats ignored him. When Nathan filmed that exact spot, the water was only about 2 to 3 feet deep. You could literally step out of the boat, not as some figure of speech. You could physically get out of a dinghy at that north end of Lubbers Quarters Key, stand up, and walk to the beach. Brian is a former United States Marine. He had an anchor on board. He had 1 oar. He was sitting in water shallow enough to stand up and walk in. Yet he claims he couldn't make it to dry land. Nathan's new footage shows what that exact spot actually looks like. And it puts the story Brian gave to a direct test. Is his claim of being stuck there actually physically plausible? Honestly, it is hard to watch those clips and match what you see with the story Brian told. Then there is another piece of the puzzle. Searchers found a paddle on the east side of Lubbers Quarters Key. This week, Ashley's sources revealed that the recovered paddle might not match the one from the Hooker dinghy. It might not even be theirs. That raises 2 big questions. Whose paddle is that? And where is the real Hooker paddle? 2 big rumors went around this week that need sorting out. First, a story spread that a sealed federal indictment had already been handed down. Ashley's sources confirmed that this is not true. As of her latest episode, there is absolutely no sealed indictment. Second, rumors that Brian has disappeared are also highly inaccurate. He has been traveling between Sacramento, where his sister lives, the sister who flew to the Bahamas to help secure his emergency passport after his detention, and Michigan, where he hired his defense attorney. Seen in Michigan, then gone 5 days later. Not out of the country. Not missing. No active indictment. Not missing. The investigation continues. Here is why it is taking time. You see, federal investigations work differently. State police usually make an arrest on probable cause, then build the case while the suspect sits in jail. Federal prosecutors do the opposite. They build about 90% of their case before they ever file a charge. Because of this, the federal conviction rate is over 90%, with some statistics placing it closer to 95%. This is a federal criminal case, and the CGIS is a federal agency. Any charges that eventually emerge will be federal. And they are building this case to that exact standard. Thorough, exhaustive, and deliberate. Ashley stated clearly that if this had been a state-level case, she believes Brian would have been arrested weeks ago. The federal standard is higher and more complete. That is not a failure. It is how the system was designed to work. The photograph taken at 7:41 p.m. The 3 directions. The outdated outboard engine on the dinghy, the missing batteries, the single flare tied to the mast, and that shallow water where Brian claims he could not reach land. Federal investigators down in Fort Pierce have already analyzed every bit of it, every single piece, every system aboard that vessel. They already know what the evidence shows. We are still waiting, but they are not. Lynette Hooker was 55 years old. She was originally from Onstead, Michigan. She would text her friends about her new Bluetooth electric motor, simply because she loved figuring out how the things around her worked. She even bought healing oil for her husband's nail issue, because that is exactly the kind of caring thing she did for the people she loved. She always called the ocean her absolute happy place. She even booked a flight back home for March. She never actually used that ticket. Now, somewhere on one of these islands, on a beach she once paddleboarded to, photographed, and truly loved, She has still not been found. She absolutely deserves to be found. She deserves the truth. And this active, ongoing federal investigation, now in possession of the Soulmate vessel and everything on board, is still slowly building toward the closure her family desperately needs. If you know anything about the disappearance of Lynette Hooker,
please contact CGIS through their anonymous tips app, available on both iOS and Android.
The Royal Bahamas Police Force investigation also remains active. Subscribe. Both links are down in the description. Subscribe to support our work. Every victim deserves the real truth. Every last story deserves to be told.